This is it. Hi everyone, Robert here, and welcome to my review of Impact July 13, 2017. So the show open up with Joseph Park and Grado arriving in a bulky, a Volkswagen, a Beetle, whatever you wanna call it, and they were discussing that Grado will be deported thanks to the new boss in town. But however, there is a immoral thing to do, which is marry someone from a knockout roster, and you will find a loophole and you can stay in the USA. So as the show keeps passing by, Grado was talking to different knockouts in order to convince either of them to date him. Therefore, he could manage to marry her, right? Which at the end, we saw Grado looking and finding Laura Banes. And she talked to her in the ring and give her all sorts of compliment, telling her that she looked beautiful and her makeup was on point, which had me laughing at that matter. And at the end, we saw Congo Kong showing up and scaring Joseph Park and Grado away. Even though I am not a fan of Grado, I found the whole angle kind of interesting to say the least, because you have a comedy character in Grado with another not serious character in Louder Van Ness. So I am not a huge fan of comedy, but it is what it is. And the other thing that I enjoy about this angle were the people getting triggered by that. Like, you know me, I am not a huge fan of marriage or anything like that, but I don't see anything evil about that. But I was laughing at the moral busybodies getting triggered because how dare Impact Wrestling make a funny comedic storyline that have to do with a somehow shady and immoral marriage. That is part of life, even though you may want to live in a bubble, but that is something that happened in the US and in other territories just to grant to get a visa or a green card or something like that. I found the people getting triggered by that hilarious. So I this week and this week only, I will fully support Grado and his whole comedy skit. So first stuff of the night, we saw the Latin American Exchange LAX. They were in the ring addressing their new member, which is Alberto El Patron. So they were trying to convince Alberto, but Alberto decided to deny them that pleasure and that privilege of him joining the Latin American Exchange LAX. Then LAX started to pick down Alberto El Patron, and none other than Walking Armageddon Lashley came in to the ring to the rescue, and he cleared the ring, and they will be teaming up in the main event of the evening, which is gonna be obviously a not title match. LAX, the Latin American Exchange, Santana y Ortiz versus Walking Armageddon Bobby Lashley and Alberto El Patron. So good opening segment. The only thing that I have to comment upon is that I think it went too long. It was about 12 to 13 minutes. I'm not a fan of big opening segment. But however, this week episode of Impact Wrestling was the highest rated in the year. So they managed to beat the number that they did last week. So they are on gaining momentum. So even though I might disagree with some of the booking decisions, it's working. The numbers are there. And I am not dumb enough to argue against numbers. So first match of the night, we got ACH versus Andrew Everett in a Super X Cup match, the first round match. At the end of that match, we saw ACH hitting a nasty brain buster to win. Solid match, even though both of these guys have that indie look, which is not that great for TV, but they didn't manage to hurt their rating. So whatever criticism comes from me, it is not that accurate according to the numbers. Andrew Everett looks very indie, even though he have been in the pro level for quite a while. That is one thing that he may have to work upon if he wants to keep being at the top of the X division. Now that the X division have Sonjay Dutt booking it, not his friend Shane Helms being booking the X division. That is why we have seen all the improvements thanks to Sonjay Dutt and Loki, who, from what I heard, are the ones moving and making the match that comes to the X division. Next, we got the Hall of Famer, Gail Kim. She came down to the ring and announced that she will be retiring this year, and she intends to retire at the top of Impact. Therefore, that means she wants to retire with the Knockouts title. Not anything bad about this, but one thing that came really fast through my mind was that Impact needs to hurry up with Aline. Get her ready. Push the metal to pedal to the metal and push her all the way near the top of the Knockouts card, so we can finally see Gail Kim versus Aline one-on-one match, because Aline have been having just straight up easy matches for this year. So we need to see Gail Kim versus Aline before she retire. And obviously we need to see Rosemary versus Gail Kim. Hopefully Gail Kim does the right thing and put both of them over, or at least make them look good. Who do you think should be the last adversary to face Gail Kim? Let me know in either the chat room or the comment section below. Next, we got Chris Adonis in the ring, and he's with Eli Drake, and he invited two guys known as the Swole Mates for like a pose, and like the whole thing got violent, and the referee came into the ring and break it out. I was not a fan of this segment. Why? Because it took too much time, and I don't think it's gonna actually lead to a match, unless I am mistaken. But I don't think those guys would be able to take bumps. It all depends if they pose for a living. I don't think someone who's posing for a living, and it is around like 8% body fat, wants to risk all of that for some wrestling bumps and taking hits in the ring, that will not be a wise idea. So I was not a fan of this segment. Next we got Los Minis, the midgets. That is, even though that is politically incorrect. Minis Wrestling. We got Demus versus Octagoncito. I was having a smile when I saw Octagoncito because I managed to see him since I was a child. Obviously, they either air CMLL here, or either Carlos Colon or Victor Jovica brought minis in. So this guy, Octagoncito, have to be around 50 years old, something like that, like 47 or something like that. That guy is not a young boy by any stretch of the imagination. So that managed to give me a big smile because that brought bad memories of good time. However, I think that match being kind of unannounced was kind of weird. I don't think that would translate to either a global audience or either an American audience. And it is not that I think there's anything wrong about the American audience. I don't think low of them, but I think they have been bombarded, at least in these tapings, with too much international talent, and I don't think they might see it like, let's say, like a carnival or something like that, or some new flavor, something more exotic. Or I don't think they could get over in the long run if they want to use them for a long time. At the end of the match, we saw Octagoncito hit Demo with a springboard moonsault from the top rope, and that was it. Next, we got another international talent. Naomichi Marufuji from Noah Pro Wrestling. He is one of the top 3 or top 2 guys during the heyday of Nova, being that obviously Kenta Kobachi, Kenta, and him, Marufuji, versus the Impact Grand Champion Moose. This match was not bad at all, and probably it looks really good on paper. But however, I found it hard to get into a match when there was so big of a difference in size between those two wrestlers, because Marufuji is not that big. He's like 5'9", something like that. But Moose is quite big, and seeing Moose selling some of the stuff that Marufuji did, I was not a fan of. They did their best. They're both good wrestler, even though I'm now hearing that there are people who don't like Moose. I'm living in a like what is it called? Uh, a weird, a bizarro land or something like that. So I am obviously a huge Moose fan, and I also like Marufuji, but I was not a big fan of this pairing. However, in the match we saw Moose winning round 1 with a couple of pop-up power bombs, bicycle kicks, back body drop, some of that good stuff. On round 2, we saw Marufuji avoiding a big cross body from Moose, and he ended up kicking a couple of times Moose from the top rope, and he was able to win the round 2. At round 3, EC3 decided that enough was enough, and he took the belt and hit Marufuji, which actually ended up cutting Marufuji the hard way. So he was bleeding and he looked mad, at least from the last footage they uploaded on Impact Wrestling on their YouTube channel. He will look pissed as hell. That's something that it was not planned, obviously, but it happened. Wrestling is pretty determined, but it is not like necessary everything will go right 100% of the time. Accidents will and can happen. So they are building towards a feud between EC3 and Moose, which is kind of weird to see EC3 in the mid card, but I support that because he have been way too long in the main event scene. Even though we have Alberto El Patron as the champion, and he's dealing with his legal trouble, so if things went south for him, we might have Impact may have to put EC3 in the main event once again, or James Storm or Eli Drake or something like that to cover that spot for if a big emergency happened with Alberto El Patron. So next we got a match with Trevor Lee versus William Weeks. This was obviously a squash match. Trevor Lee had the exhibition title around his waist during the whole match, obviously guarding in, since he stole it from Sanjay Dutt, and Sanjay Dutt was being held down by security. And at the end, we saw obviously Trevor Lee winning, and the security guard at that time, they kind of lose strength and let Sanjay Dutt escape and look after Trevor Lee. This was not bad at all. Actually, I was laughing and stuff about Trevor Lee cutting a promo, which it was not bad. And this might be the best showing as a promo guy on Impact Wrestling, because he had Sugar Shane Helms cutting promos from him. So when you have training wheels, you will never end up to run a bicycle by yourself, because you have always training wheels. That is why at the end of the day, Sugar Shane Helms was hurting Trevor Lee more than he was helping him. Even though I think Trevor Lee, it is very likely that he will leave once his contract is over, because obviously the father of Trevor Lee was the financial backer of the son, the brother of Jeff Hardy, when he was running Omega, his Omega promotion in the woods that he lived, or something like that. Next, we got Laurel Banes versus Ava Story. Squash match. Ava Story, very, very good looking woman. Oh my god. Gotta put her over. But this is not about looks. This is about the wrestling. So, Laurel Banes, at the end, she hit Ava Story with Hangman DDT, and instead of going for the pin, she ended up hitting a curb stomp, and that was it. Then they decided to do the last spot with Congo Kong showing up and scaring Grado and Joseph Park away. Main event time. We got the Latin American Exchange, LAX, Santana y Ortiz versus the Unified World Champion, as of this moment, Alberto El Patron and walking Armageddon Lashley. No title match, obviously. Cool tag team match. I actually enjoy seeing Lashley as a main event star working now as a tag team wrestler. He seems to be more pumped than ever. I think this is one of the few occasions which he have been put into a big tag team match. So I support that. We saw a lot of good stuff, obviously out of the Latin American exchange. There was time that El Patron was able to connect a reverse suplex from the second rope, tagging Lashley in. Then later down the line, we saw El Patron connecting an Insiguri and followed by a backcracker. We also saw Homicide attacking Lashley on the outside. And in the end, we saw a double team. Lashley ended up doing part, I think it was some sort of suplex, and El Patron ended up helping that suplex by hitting a double foot stomp on Santana for the win. This was not a bad match at all, even though there is a black cloud at the moment for Alberto El Patron, but that didn't matter when it comes down to wrestling and the ratings, right? However, the ending. Let's talk about the ending. The ending of the match. We saw Alberto El Patron and Lashley winning. LAX ended up beating down Alberto El Patron since he turned his back on the Latin American exchange. However, Lashley managed to also turn his back on Alberto El Patron. He was being beat down in the ring, and Lashley left and went to the back. That didn't matter to him at that moment. So we got a second week in a row, which we have a cliffhanger at the end of an episode, which that managed to be successful when it comes down to numbers. Not my favorite impact, especially because I fell it down more than, how can I put it? I think it had too many flavor for some other people. I didn't have a problem with the show, obviously, because I watch wrestling from all around the world. I watch Dragon Gate, I watch AAA, CMLL, all sorts of stuff. I watch WWL from here, Puerto Rico. So I didn't have a problem as per se. But I will understand anyone who only watches mainstream American wrestling that they will not like this episode of Impact. Even though there might be some that will find interesting the whole exotic flavor of having so many international wrestlers and also having a multiple exhibition matches throughout this time as a taping. So I guess this is it for me and my review. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. I guess this is it for me. Thank you so much. Goodbye and thanks for listening.